The morning sun filtered through the Venetian blinds of Rose's diner, casting long stripes of golden light across the checkered floor. Dorothy had worked at this diner for 37 years. She knew every crack in the vinyl booths, every squeak in the floorboards, and exactly how each regular customer took their coffee. At 72 years old, her hands weren't as steady as they used to be, but her smile was just as warm. She tied her apron strings a little tighter that morning, smoothed down her gray hair, and began her shift like she had thousands of times before. The breakfast rush had just ended when a group of young men walked through the door. They wore expensive sneakers and designer clothes that probably cost more than Dorothy made in a month. The one in front couldn't have been more than 19. He had that look of someone who'd never been told no in his entire life. Dorothy greeted them with her usual kindness. "Good morning, boys. Sit anywhere you like and I'll be right with you." They chose a booth by the window. Dorothy could hear them laughing loudly, making jokes she didn't quite understand. She pulled out her order pad and approached their table with a pot of fresh coffee. "What can I get for you fellas today?" she asked, her voice gentle and patient. The young man in the Supreme shirt barely looked up from his phone. "Yeah, I want the pancakes. But make sure they're not burned like last time. And I want real maple syrup, not that fake stuff." Dorothy nodded kindly. "Honey, this is your first time here. We've never served you before. But don't you worry, we use real maple syrup and our cook makes the best pancakes in 3 counties. His friend snickered. The young man's face reddened. He didn't like being corrected, especially not by someone he considered beneath him. "Just bring the food, old lady," he muttered. Dorothy's smile never wavered. She'd dealt with all kinds in her years waitressing. Rudeness usually came from pain or insecurity. She took the rest of their orders and headed back to the kitchen. In the corner booth, 3 men sat quietly. They wore leather vests with motorcycle club patches. Their arms were covered in tattoos and their beards were long and well kept. They'd been coming to Rose's diner every Saturday for 5 years. They always ordered the same thing and they always left Dorothy a generous tip. The biggest one was named Frank. He was 58 years old and looked like he could bend steel with his bare hands. But Dorothy knew he cried at the animal shelter commercials and volunteered at the veterans' home every Tuesday. Frank and his friends had noticed the young men when they walked in. Now they were watching carefully. Dorothy brought out the food, balancing 3 plates with the skill of decades of practice. As she approached the table, her shoe caught on something. Later she'd realize one of the boys had stuck his foot out deliberately. The plates tilted. She tried to steady them, but gravity and age won out. The pancakes slid right off the plate and landed with a wet splat on the young man's expensive shirt. The diner went silent. Dorothy's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. Let me get some napkins. I'll pay for the cleaning, I promise." The young man stood up slowly. His face was twisted with rage. "You stupid old woman. Do you know how much this shirt costs?" "I truly am sorry," Dorothy said, her voice shaking now. "It was an accident. Please let me make it right." What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. The young man picked up his glass of water and before anyone could stop him, he threw the contents right in Dorothy's face. Then he did something even worse. He spit at her. The water dripped from Dorothy's hair down her face, mixing with tears. She was trying hard to hold back. In all her years no one had ever treated her with such cruelty. The scraping of chairs against linoleum broke the silence. Frank and his 2 friends stood up. Their massive frames seemed to fill the entire diner. Frank walked over slowly, deliberately. He stood between Dorothy and the young man, towering over him like an oak tree over a sapling. "Son," Frank said, his voice low and controlled, "you're going to apologize to this lady." The young man tried to look tough, but his voice cracked. "Get out of my face, old man. This doesn't concern you." Frank didn't move. "It concerns every decent person in this diner. Dorothy has been serving this community with kindness and respect longer than you've been alive. You're going to apologize. And you're going to mean it." The young man looked around. His friends had suddenly become very interested in their phones. The other diners were staring at him with expressions of disgust. He was alone in his cruelty. "I don't have to do anything," he said, but his voice was smaller now. Frank's friend Marcus stepped forward. He was 62 and had kind eyes behind his weathered face. "Let me tell you something, kid. My mother was a waitress. She raised 3 boys on tips and minimum wage. She worked double shifts so we could play sports and go to college. She had varicose veins from standing all day and arthritis in her hands, but she never complained. When I see someone disrespect a person who's working hard to earn an honest living, it makes me think they were raised without any sense of what matters in this world. The third man, Tommy, spoke up. We all make mistakes, son. We all have moments we're not proud of. But a real man owns up to those moments. A real man apologizes when he's wrong. What you do in the next 60 seconds will say a lot about who you really are. Dorothy touched Frank's arm gently. It's all right, she said softly. He's just a boy. He doesn't know any better. That simple act of grace seemed to crack something open in the young man. Here was this woman he'd just humiliated showing him compassion he didn't deserve. His eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry, he whispered. Then louder, I'm really sorry, ma'am. That was horrible. There's no excuse for what I did. I'm so sorry. The transformation was startling. Suddenly he wasn't a cocky teenager anymore. He was just a scared kid who'd done something terrible and knew it. Dorothy smiled at him, a real genuine smile. I forgive you, sweetheart. We all have bad days. We all do things we regret. What matters is what we do next. The young man reached for his wallet. Please let me pay for everything. For everyone here. And for any damages. Frank shook his head. That's a start, but it's not enough. You're going to come back here next Saturday. You're going to help Dorothy with her shift. Clearing tables, washing dishes, whatever she needs. You're going to learn what honest work feels like. The young man nodded quickly. Yes, sir. I will. I promise. Over the next few months something beautiful happened. The young man, whose name was Jason, came back every Saturday just like he promised. At first he was clumsy and complaints came easily. But Dorothy was patient with him. She taught him how to balance plates and remember orders, and most importantly how to treat every customer with dignity. Frank and his friends became his unlikely mentors. They taught him about respect, about community, about being a man who contributes rather than takes. They told him stories from their lives, lessons learned the hard way. Jason's expensive clothes stayed home. He wore simple jeans and a t-shirt and worked hard. The regulars watched his transformation with approval. By the 4th month he was actually good at the job. More than that, he seemed happy. One Saturday Jason brought his father to the diner. His dad was a wealthy businessman, always on his phone, always in a hurry. Jason wanted him to meet Dorothy and the bikers. Dad, these people taught me more about life in 3 months than I learned in 19 years. They showed me what really matters. Jason's father looked at his son, really looked at him, and saw someone different. Someone better. He shook hands with Frank, with Marcus, with Tommy. He hugged Dorothy and thanked her for not giving up on his boy. Dorothy retired the following spring. The diner threw her a huge party. Jason was there with his father. Frank and his whole motorcycle club came. The restaurant was packed with people whose lives she'd touched over 37 years. Jason stood up to speak. I came to this diner thinking I was better than everyone here. I was wrong about everything that mattered. Dorothy showed me grace when I deserved none. Frank and his friends taught me what strength really looks like. It's not about money or clothes or acting tough. It's about standing up for people who need standing up for. It's about kindness even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. He paused, wiping his eyes. I'm going to community college now. I'm studying to be a teacher. I want to help kids understand these lessons before they have to learn them the hard way like I did. Everything good that happens in my life from this point on started here in this diner with people who cared enough to teach me better. Dorothy hugged him tight. I always knew you had a good heart, honey. You just needed some folks to help you find it. Years later Jason would tell his own children about the day he learned what really matters. About a waitress who showed him grace. About bikers who taught him strength. About how one moment of cruelty became a doorway to becoming a better person. And sometimes on Saturday mornings he'd meet Frank and Marcus and Tommy at the diner that was now called Dorothy's Place. They'd sit in that same corner booth and remember the day everything changed. The day that proved it's never too late to learn kindness and never too late to become who you were meant to be all along.